Good stuff. Good morning, George. How you doing?
Morning, Gary. How are you doing? I'm great.
Good. Well, I thought we'd talk about tokens again, and I know you're saying, I think tokens again, but I think tokens are something that will need to be solved. And I think some people take SaaS for granted, and I don't. I've been looking a lot into SaaS and becoming to love SaaS a lot more than I ever did when I feel how elegant it was in solving a problem. And I'm a finance guy, and the problem is in finance, which sounds ridiculous, is that sometimes we can barely count the number of people that work there. And that sounds insane, especially to a mathematician like you. How can you not count the number of people? But there are many organizations, George, especially banks where you have turnkey consultants and you have full-time consultants and you have like part-time consultants and you have all FTC, you have a lot of different employment standards where you don't really know how to count people because you can't put them on for one reason and take them off for another. And so I've become to love SaaS, and I think tokens, will take over a large part of the SaaS budget. And so I thought we would have a chat because you're good at solving problems about solving the token problem.
You can solve the token problem. This is very difficult to solve. I mean, if you talk to Amazon, the rumored company that paid the huge bill of $500 million, I think, in Anthropic, I think they would say that this is not something that you can easily solve. You just redirect, and I think you launched a post about that. You can redirect budgets from something else to tokens. And that's all there is to it, because they are expensive and they are predictable. That's the main thing with tokens, and they don't solve problems. They get some jobs done, but that's all there is to it. You have to solve the problem.
Yeah, okay, you've hit the nail on the head there. So I'm going to give you my spiel. So this is a LinkedIn post. So I say tokens are not cheap. They don't perform consistently. True. They don't really care about your hierarchical position. You could be MD George, or you could be someone who graduated, and they're going to cost you the same. They only care about your thinking and your willingness to experiment. So if I take those again, they're not cheap, they don't perform consistently, they don't care about hierarchical position, and they only care about your thinking and willingness to experiment. And if I put that into another company's name and take us back 20 years or so, maybe 22, that's 2004, 2005, that could be an explanation of PPC, pay-per-click. They're not cheap. They started off cheap. Generally, you've got to do more of them. They don't perform consistently. No one knows what they're going to get out of a click, essentially. They don't care about your position. Many digital firms, literally from two guys in a room or two girls in a room, rose into massive digital agencies because they knew how to do clicks. And they only care about your willingness to think and experiment. So when I started writing that, I think this is very similar to even Facebook today or Meta. It's actually very difficult to know what you're going to get in terms of return on ad spend. Some people are getting 2x, some people are getting 1x, some people are getting 0.5x, some people are getting 10x. It's pretty variable, even sometimes with the same ad copy, even sometimes with the same actual image. And so the variances are probably as wild as tokens.
Yeah. What I think is strange today with AI tools as opposed to advertising, I think it's the predictability of the cost and how many tokens you are going to consume, because this is the unknown next. This is what you don't know in that way. More or less, after 3 years of experimenting with all these tools, I think most of us, at least some people who are a bit more experienced in using Gen AI tools, we have been trained to get to know more or less what to expect in terms of hallucinations, of quality, of direction, of the answers that we get out of these tools. Sometimes we get surprised, that's true, but now it's an exception more than the rule. after so many years of experimenting with these tools. But still, the main thing that we don't know is, okay, how much time, consumption, tokens, and eventually money is going to get us in order to get through this problem and eventually get some decent solutions, directions, or whatever.
Yeah.
The predictability part, by the way, because you mentioned SaaS before 2 decades or so, was one of the main differentiators of SaaS, as opposed to anything else back then, cloud costs, licensing costs, hidden new modules, new versions costs, and so on and so forth. And SaaS came and said, guys, now everything is predictable. Everything is under the same service, licensing, cloud hosting, blah, blah, blah. You don't have to care about this. We do that. And that was a lift of a burden. And they solved directly an actual problem that IT departments had, and they won the game back then with SaaS. And now we're going to destroy this value by making things unpredictable again in order to create value. So that's very strange. This is why token is not a sure bet right now, but it's a big question mark, at least in my mind.
Yeah, so I think what you said is brilliant there, because fundamentally what I think tokens are doing are pretty much saying that these are not for everybody. So most scenarios, most technology, we kind of think, yeah, most people should be able to utilize that. And we've grown up with the Microsofts and the Adobes, etc., pretty much saying we're democratizing everything. And in reality, if I think about it from my perspective, tokens are autocratizing everything. They're making it so it's exclusionary. If you can't afford to use it because you don't have a business case on the back of it, then actually it's not really for you. And that's very different from all the other 10, £20 notions, etc., that we can all use, everybody can use. And some people are power users, some people are not. It's going back to the age where saying you and I are not going to buy an IBM mainframe, even if when we do a startup, and we just couldn't afford to. Even if you could use it, we couldn't afford. Because they're saying this is not for you, George. This mainframe is not for you. Even if you want to create a nuclear weapon or whatever, this is not for you yet. And I think AI is pretty much doing that. Even though they've said it's democratizing intelligence, I don't believe with the cost structure it is.
It isn't. I have an example, a recent example from a tool that I'm using. I'm not going to mention the name of it, but it's a video editing tool. And anyway, as all other tools, they have added some additional AI features and they like to start experimenting. They give you some free credits, which is nothing. Just use that and experiment all the way through, getting some decent results. And then you have to pay. So practically, in order to experiment and see how the tool works, and at least in the versions that I've tested before a few months, it didn't work well.
Yeah.
So you had to exhaust all your free credits and then start paying in order to experiment and see if it's a decent tool for these additional AI enhancements or not. It doesn't work like that. I have to be convinced, first of all. I have to be able to predict more or less how many iterations should I do with this tool in order to get something decent, because in the beginning I don't.
Yeah.
And then when there is something concrete, I get this value more or less. I will use these credits and this is the cost that goes with it. I balance it, and if it looks great, I buy it. Otherwise, I don't. So in terms of adoption, I think it's very, very difficult to do that with tokens. You need other pricing schemes to help adoption because we're still in this phase, especially when you are adding tools, adding new enhancements, things that are still not proven yet.
Yeah.
And the perceived quality is lower or the uncertainty is higher. So definitely I'm not willing to pay a fortune testing. I think that's a major problem in the industry right now. It is not the same, obviously, when we're talking about more established tools like Gen AI, tools like Anthropic, like OpenAI, more established. But still, the lack of predictability and the lack of something more concrete in terms of value versus money paid, price paid, still is a big problem towards bigger adoption.
Yeah, so I totally agree. My favorite tool is Leonardo, which I'm positive about, so we'll say online. And I know that within 5 to 6 iterations, which is like about 30-40p, I'm going to get a really good image. So the first one's like give me then practice 2 or 3, and then the last 3 are like bang, this is exactly the syntax. I know I'm going to get a good image. So I think image generations are very good. Even writing, within 6 attempts at writing, I know I'm going to get a good skeleton from Anthropic, Claude or whatever, or ChatGPT. So the difference, I say, between my comfort now and, say, if we were doing Google ads or whatever, or Insta ads, is that the Insta ads would kind of almost immediately come with the dopamine of, I've got a sale somewhere, or I've got a lead that leads to a sell. So they give me one order of measure, or any client, to say, you know what, you're one step closer. And I think the problem is what you've highlighted there, that with GN AI and all the tools that we have, we know we've automated stuff, but it doesn't take us far enough to say, well, okay, well, that guy's going to go, or that lady's going to go. And enterprises are thinking, well, yeah, I know I'm further along, but the outcome is maybe 4 derivations away. Whereas I think Google and even the image generators today are quite good, but Google and Facebook were always saying, well, you're only 1 or 2. You're either an MQL away, or you've actually got a sell. And I think that's part of the problem, is that it's still too far away, the realization of the value in most of the people's hands.
Yeah. And I think this is because you see big differences in the target audience between Anthropic and OpenAI. OpenAI is broader, and it targets also consumers, individuals, not just enterprises. Whereas Anthropic is very, very focused on bigger enterprises, also guys that can pay huge or bigger bills than a simple individual. So for Anthropic, I see that the $100 per month plan is most likely their base plan.
Yeah.
Whereas for OpenAI, the $20 per month, it's the base plan, and it's very rich and offers you everything and so on. So this is why I think that Anthropic is against advertisement, whereas OpenAI has opened up the platform. But I'm not sure how they launch this all over the world, possibly gradually, or I don't know. But I think that eventually OpenAI will follow this path because of their target audience, broader and less spending capacity. They cannot afford to increase enormously their bills with hidden tokens, capacity consumption, things like that. Anthropic does that all of the time. They're making a fortune, I think, billions in there, something like that. But OpenAI will expand with giving value not just through the tool and the answers that you get out of it, which is amazing, obviously, but also giving you access to audiences. I mean, imagine right now with your business, my business, everybody's business, if you do a search advertisement, or you do search engine optimization, all the usual things that we do, or banner advertisements with all the usual tools, as opposed doing, when this is available, through ChatGPT, a very, very focused advertisement of your services for someone who contextually searches for something which is best fit for your work. I would pay money for it, because I'm pretty sure if the context is there and this lead lands on my website or my mail or whatever, eventually the conversion rate will be huge, or at least the relevance will be huge. It's qualified by definition because of the contextual process that's happening behind under the which is not the case with Google advertisements, Meta, and so on. So this is where I think the value will come from for OpenAI, as opposed to Anthropic, where it will come from automation, integrations, and all of the things that they are offering to a greater extent, as opposed to OpenAI.
Yeah, so that kind of suggests they've got to work on the product a lot more, you basically say. And that's, I suppose, to do that, you you still have to kind of believe that this is going to be very specific for specific people, and it's not necessarily going to democratize intelligence across 3 billion people, and as some of the saying they were talking about earlier. And so,
Yeah.
in that sense, maybe switch tack a little bit. If we think about the kind of the most used term on LinkedIn pricing, which would be value based, well, one of the most used terms, kind of amorphous, a bit nebulous, and it's kind of hard to define. But I can see the kind of discomfort when some people are expressing, because they're using this value based, but then tokens are crashing in to that kind of faith based approach to pricing, and I can see people struggling to reconcile the two. Have you seen the same conflict?
There is a conflict there. Definitely, there is a conflict there because the position of token-based pricing is that, hey guys, this is consistent to value-based pricing because we're delivering actual value and not plain subscriptions. But it's not like that because of the discussion that we did initially. Token is not necessarily value. It is related to value, obviously, but does not necessarily translate into value, first of all, because it's output, it's job done, it's not revenue generation, it's not cost or efficiency, so on and so forth. And also their pricing is a bit vague because their consumption is a bit vague. So the value is there, but it's not fully transparent or fully directional related to the actual value delivered to the customer. It's indirect still. Plus their pricing is not transparent at all because of the consumption. That means that it's not value-based pricing, it's something related to that. A step away from subscription-based pricing, yes, with some, elements of value-based pricing, but very far from actual value-based pricing. Plus, it contains token-based pricing. The single most important error in value-based pricing that all advisors and consultants advise against that when you talk about value-based pricing to the customer, you talk in their terms, what they consider value, not what you consider value. And in your case, it's tokens, the supplier side, on the vendor side, because this is what has compute time, so it has cost. So it's an internal view in the end.
Yeah.
That happens to indirectly relate to some of the values of the customer. So this is where things get wrong, I believe, with token-based prices, unless they find a way to directly relate it to values, or at least position it as something else. It's more granular, more direct, more job done, output-based, not outcome-based, and so on and so forth. There will always be many customers thinking, it's not exactly what we were expecting. They will pay more.
But do you think they're the case for, if we look at, let's take your example earlier where they create special spaces or constraints around certain areas where people in certain industries really are focused and they're really, really helpful. Say that works and there are 10 participants, more than that, but say there were 10 companies. There's going to generally be a winner or two. And could those token companies or the Anthropic say, well, actually, we're not going to democratize anymore. We're actually value-based, but the value is intrinsic to the people that use the system. So you and I, in a similar scenario, you and I use Google, and if there are 10 other consultants, eventually one or two are going to come out just better at it. And if that was a machine to print money for pricing consultancy or whatever, or speeches or whatever, then that person would just be turning the handle, because they would simply bid more in the second price auction than we would, because they would have the budget to do so, because their value is better than ours from that same tool. And so I was trying to argue with myself mostly, basically saying that, what if it is winner take all? And so You and I both go for tokens, and it's winner take all. You have a financial model which is better than mine, so you're the winner. And then you get people challenging you, just like they challenge certain brands, etc., with Google Ads, etc., or Meta ads. But there's a clear winner because that person's willing to one experiment more and has more money to experiment because their business model simply supports it. And so I'm thinking maybe the value isn't democratized, but the value base comes in for those companies that are the winners in each category, able to use those very expensive tokens to still make a very profitable business somehow.
I think the most important part is exactly what you said about choosing if you're democratizing the market or not, doing something else. Anthropic, everybody says right now that we are democratizing the market, and obviously AI is for everyone, and so on and so forth. But that's just philosophical elements and nothing else and things. It's not the reality. What we see in practice is that Anthropic is for the elite of bigger companies mostly, for people who have some money to experiment in order to assess the value of the system and eventually follow up and enhance, improve their systems with Anthropic, integrated IT environment, and so on and so forth. So it's heavier, it costs more, it needs more time to experiment. So definitely this is not democratizing. This is focused on bigger enterprise companies or smaller ones, but companies, usually not individuals, and definitely not people who don't have money to spend and test these things out. If you go to ChatGPT, to OpenAI, on the other hand, they still have target audience with enterprises, obviously. Actually, if you remember before a year, 1.5 years, Sam Altman also launched a consulting part of the business that focuses in big companies and so on and so forth. But that's part of the business. The main business is democratization. And you can clearly see that of how open they are in giving away their time, their bandwidth, their value, their tokens and everything with cheaper plans, like the 20 plan. The $20 plan is better than 100 plan of Anthropics in terms of bandwidth, not quality of outputs. That's a different. I have an opinion about that, but that's a different discussion, by the way.
Yeah.
So I think this is exactly the point. As a company, an AI company, I'm focusing on democratizing the AI space, whatever space I'm focusing on. Or do I want to skim the market with a specific niche? Not niche. We're talking about the enterprise market. It's a huge market, but I'm focusing on these guys alone, and I want to make huge money out of it. And you can definitely see that. Anthropic is accelerating faster than OpenAI, although they started months or a year after OpenAI. They definitely, I'm not sure if they are profitable right now, most likely not, but they are less unprofitable than OpenAI, and with the prospect to increase and improve their finances in the near future. So it's a completely different ball game. If you ask me what's best for society, my answer would be both. Because if you are a company, yes, you need a more focused company like Anthropic. And if you are an individual or a smaller company, yes, you need the democratization aspect that OpenAI offers. In the beginning, that's all that we needed, by the way. So these guys paved, they set up the scene for everyone to come and enter the AI space, including Anthropic. So respect to OpenAI for that, but respect to Anthropic for achieving something great in terms of monetizing the value generated by Gen.
Yeah, so I agree with that totally, that they're both going to have a part. But I was listening to a lot of the noise last week around the Kimi or GLM Kimi, Quen, just all the Chinese models, essentially. And it's kind of laughable, I suppose you could say, that people have switched from we need to have sovereign AI to actually bugger it. It's the cheapest AI. I'm going to get myself a BYD AI. That's what I want. Forget the Teslas. And so the switch has been pretty more rapid than I had imagined, particularly from the kind of patriotic US companies, the ones that kind of beat the drum. I was surprised how quickly they switched and said, I'm going to go for the cheapest possible. But even if you go for cheaper, to your point, that still doesn't prove that you're going to get any value. So the value bit comes first, and then it's like, well, how do I get the cheapest version of that value? But I think the question that they're not answered with the cheaper models is, are the cheaper models showing you a cheaper way of getting value and the expensive ones a more expensive way, or the fact that you haven't really got any value, so you might as well go cheap? And I couldn't, on all the discourse, I couldn't really heard where someone said, you know what, I've got the perfect example. I've got the perfect product. I've developed it. I'm selling it. And this model came along, Kimmy, and it's just 10 times cheaper. Well, great. Very little of that conversation. More of the, well, it's just cheaper. Of course I'm going to use it.
It all has to do with what is considered value in different target audiences. So if we are talking about bigger companies or companies with confidential data, sensitive data, their own data or their customers' data, or whatever, then trust is a major value. It's a major thing, and they won't switch to something else automatically because it seems better. It's not better, by the way, but it seems equal, let's say, in quality. But it remains to be seen, of course, in real life and in practice. Plus, it's cheaper. They won't do that. I'm pretty sure about this. But if you are considering a different target audience, like extremely smaller companies with no sensitive data, or individuals that want to find recipes, celebrities, news, I don't know, things like that, which are obviously non-sensitive, whatever, then in this case, yes. Obviously, if they are using a paid version of ChatGPT, most likely not Anthropic. In this case, they would consider something free or cheaper or whatever. But in this case also, I think this target audience would not have a paid version anyway. So
Yeah.
if we're talking about the monetized part of the AI community that are paying something right now, the $20 or whatever they are paying to whatever tool, I think that most of these guys, companies, individuals, already consider the confidentiality, trust, and everything something important because they are doing something more sensitive.
Yes. Yeah, I
And
agree.
more demanding with these subscriptions. If the only thing that you want to do is find out where to travel and organize it, things like that,
Yeah.
use free ChatGPT or use whatever, obviously. So I think there is a threat. Competition, it's healthy competition, it's not threat from these Chinese guys or whatever guys out there that use new tools. But it's not a real threat, at least not yet, at least trust is built for the monetized part.
Yeah.
So for the profitable or monetized part of the equation or of the community. So practically not a big threat yet. It could become a big threat once they create a big base of free users or low paid users. And eventually they build trust over the years and they do have a big unpaid in the beginning base and start converting. So after many years, not just one, by the way,
Yeah.
this could happen in 5 years, in 6, possibly 10 years. Then yes, this could become a threat, but not yet, not right now. It didn't happen with DeepSeek. We remember the case before 1.5 years, something like
Yeah.
that. And everybody says that's the collapse of Anthropic. Anthropic was not a big deal by back then. And everybody thought that perhaps this is it. OpenAI will be destroyed, bankrupt, and DeepSeek is going to be number one or whatever. Nonsense. Nothing happened. Nothing.
Yeah.
And now we have a different one.
Yeah. I agree, mate. And it's got me thinking about the fact that normally people come back to value-based pricing. Someone internally is justifying why they need this product. So you normally have a very good internal champion that's able to explain the value to his or her seniors. And then obviously the person externally who's selling the product is also explaining a value and the wider market value. So you have many people explaining the value if you're going to sell that product internally, champions all the way up the chain, and then externally. And to use that example, whether people understand what the value is or not, I don't see many people able to articulate the value easily with AI, even though I think there's value, you think there's value, but that's to us. But in a corporate, I haven't heard many stories on podcasts or writings or YouTube where someone's able to completely nail the value in a very simple way, and then the external person come in and say pretty much the same thing with the wider market. So I think the AI itself and the tokens, I don't think is a bad thing, but I think, as you said, the infrastructure around it isn't great, because the infrastructure needs champions on both sides. It needs accountability, it needs predictability, budgetability, all the abilities. And I think that maturity isn't really there. Hence, you haven't got the same as Google had a whole industry grow around it, the digital ad agency. There's no way you and I would scale to 10 million doing digital ads just ourselves. But if we had a profitable business, we could use an agency. And I can see a lot of the AI agencies at work, but they tend to be, from ones I've seen, much more, to your point, get it in and get the output cranking, not the same as kind of the digital agencies, which is let me crank the handle and try and give you a return on ad spend. If I'm good, you'll put more money into my machine. And so I think that kind of infrastructure around the tokens, I just don't think is there yet.
There is a big confusion with value-based pricing and how it's applied in practice, especially in huge companies with huge bases like the big AI companies. This is why, because when we think about value-based pricing, we think about confidential one-to-one deals, negotiations, big customers from big, let's say, manufacturing companies. They have something like 100, 200, 500 big customers. They make millions out of this. So that's all there is. And obviously, they can afford to have specialized teams doing value-based selling, value-based pricing things individually for each and every customer. It's one deal per customer or some deals per customer. It can be done. And this is the usual thing that we have in our mind about value-based pricing. But think now about Gen AI tools. Think about OpenAI, think Anthropic. They have something like 1 billion people targeting all around the world, perhaps even more. Some are execs, some are individuals, less possibly. Think about that. You can really afford to execute on a personalized basis, on a deal by deal, face to face or whatever, negotiations, personalized per company. So in this case, although it's B2B sales, if we're talking about the business part of business, individuals, although it's B2B, it's not standard manufacturing B2B with a few big customers. Now you have a few big customers, yes, they can do that there, possibly, and you never know, because this is a confidential discussion. You will never know, me or you. But if we're talking about the lots of companies, smaller companies all around the world, although it's B2B, it's closer to B2C in terms of penetration and marketing instruments used there. You need to have something standardized, a standardized plan. You need to have a standardized argumentation, and you need to figure out the standardized, more or less average value for this customer.
Yeah.
I think what you are referring to is the latter, not the former. The former is there, but it's invisible because it's happening behind the scenes. The other part is not there. And the only thing that it's there is that tokens are great, and it's a step forward beyond the standard SaaS subscription. SaaS is dead, token came, and they will change the world. This is definitely not enough. This is value-based, sorry that I will say that, nonsense. It doesn't work. People do that because they can afford not to do that, obviously, because this is how these companies work, and everybody goes into token. But I don't think that everyone is happy with that. I think most of the companies are not happy Some can afford it, so they do it anyway. Some they can afford it, stop doing it, or they find ways to limit consumption,
Yes.
which means that the overall narrative starting to perhaps collapse is a big term, a grandiose term, but it starts to deteriorate a bit and needs enhancement. It needs to change. And how
Yeah.
that can change? Possibly with the way that you said. So identifying different parts of the market with different values attached to each and every customer there, and building a different narrative per customer segment. Again, I'm talking about the bigger companies and so on and so forth.
Yes.
This is what Anthropic is trying to do right now. They have the specialized skills for legal, for accounting, for this or that, and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. They try to create some segments, and the value is the story more than the tool. I'm pretty sure
Yes.
the tool is customized for legal purposes, for instance, or accounting. But I'm not so sure if it's so customized to justify a specialized term. The marketing effect is bigger. The targeting effect is bigger. This creates perceived value more than actual value. Remain to be seen in practice.
Yeah. I think, to be honest, very similar to. Trying to think of a machine, yeah. I keep on coming back to Google. A machine that learns from the fact that you're spending money and the fact that you're making mistakes. Whereas SaaS didn't really learn from individual mistakes as quickly. They would have research and they'd have product guys and girls and they'd ask you questions and they could product analytics, they could see what George was doing in Notion and stuff, but they could never really see what you're doing. It's almost like not as bad as a telephone call, but almost as bad as a telephone call. You could be to making £1 million call, $1 trillion call to buy SpaceX, or just talking to your mum. So it's very, very opaque. So in that scenario, I keep on coming back to the democratization thing's dead, but they're going to have to find the use cases that are willing to spend disproportionate amounts of money. And so people will laugh about whether it's Amazon or someone spending, I don't know, £500, 500 million a month or whatever. That's a lot of money to you and I, but to big companies like, Amazon or top 20, 50 Fortune 50 companies, yeah, it's like whatever. Their marketing budget is insane. And if we think about the marketing budget now compared to where it was in 2002 and the amount of money that goes into the marketing and sales and marketing, which is still hovering around the late 30s, early 40% of revenue. That would have been insane. Other than Coca-Cola and a couple of others, that would have been an insane amount of money. Whereas now it's completely the norm for every SaaS company to spend between, 38 and 42% on sales and marketing. It's also completely natural for them to spend circa 20% up to 30% on R&D stroke BAU engineering. And so those amounts would have been unheard of in a normal industrial company or any company in the 60s and 70s, even if they were in tech, because they'd be like, what do you mean this much on advertising? The product is the advertising. And so I think tokens are also going to shift that paradigm where people just say, you know what? Yeah, we spend 25% of our budget on tokens. That's it. It's not even a big deal. Because most SaaS companies can barely see what comes out of the R&D cost. Very few companies completely re-engineer the product every year. Yet every year they spend 25% of their revenue on R&D.
I think it's important what you said in the beginning about the granularity of usage that tokens offer. That's a great value. That's a great value partly for the user because they can pick up whatever no pay for. That's a clear benefit. And also for the vendor because they can understand what the usage is. But usage doesn't equate token. I mean, you should be able as a vendor, even with a SaaS key, even with packs of prepaid tokens, let's call them like that, or I don't know, objects of usability, to identify where usage lies, where you have more usage or less usage, and then reconfigure your packs, reconfigure possibly additional extras based on usage, unbundle, bundle, and so on and so forth. This is an exercise that should be happening anyway when we had standard subscriptions, but perhaps it didn't. And now we find the solution of creating a complexity with tokens to measure something that we would have measured anyway. The problem with exposing this complexity is with the customer. Because most companies, they have now millions of agents out there, millions of token-based whatever things out there. It's difficult for them internally for vendors to make something out of this complexity. And imagine the customer.
Yeah.
Don't have the time to scrutinize each and every token, each and every agent, understand this amount. It's extremely, it's insane. You really can't do that. The vendor should be able to do that. It's their own complexity to handle, not ours, not the customer. Granularity, yes, it's great. We like it as customers, but not at an expense of less predictability and more complexity. This is the part that annoys everyone, I'm pretty sure. On top of the big bills, which comes from predictability and complexity. I mean, if it was just one token, okay, you will experiment with this token, you will understand more or less what you consume. Not easy, but at least it's just one. Okay, you will be there after a year or months of experimentation. But we're not talking about hundreds of tokens for agents, I mean, per customer, per vendor. This is insane. I have to experiment for ages in order to understand what's happening there. And it's really not my problem to solve. It's the vendor's problem to solve. A statistical problem of the vendor to solve and simplify. This balance is the art of monetization, the art of packaging, the art of all the things that we know in the monetization and pricing world for decades. Not now, not with AI. With everything else, it was the same exercise. And now we ask practically our customers to solve this.
Totally. Yes.
Problem. That's a problem.
So I think I'm agreeing with you 100%, but also saying that the most profitable companies that dominate today have still also made it the customer's problem to solve the value equation. And so Google, to this day, make it the customer's problem to solve the value equation. So do Meta. And so in many ways, in 20 years, maybe 15, 20 years since those two have come out, that platform should be as easy to use for, I don't know, a high school graduate, 16, 17, 18. Because it should be, well, we've had 20 years of feedback from the customer, the platform's simple, we've learned, we've made the dialogue box easy, we've made the ability to put money on easily, we've made the copying of ads, we've made it. It's still not for the average person. It still requires, from what I listen to and what I've seen, I put some ads on myself, you've got to be on your game. You've got to be on your game to know what to not waste money. Similarly with LinkedIn ads. Have you ever done LinkedIn ads? Yeah, so I would say you're the kind of, not blowing smoke, you're at the kind of one, you'll give it a go and you're at the top end. That isn't for the average person to get good value out of. Anybody put money on it, but it's not for the average person. You've got to be on your game and down a rabbit hole, to be honest, to be really good. And I would say that's kind of my thinking after using it for 2.5 years and really loving it. But every time it pushes me to go, like you had to go down a rabbit hole with LinkedIn and do research and then work out budgets and that, it's kind of doing that every single prompt. It's making you really, really think. So to me, it hasn't made it easier. It's made it tangentially harder, but with good challenging questions like, that was rubbish, Gary. You can see that. Or it would write something really verbose. So I'm thinking that actually this tool is not democratized. It isn't for the ordinary person to make them smarter, not in a way that's profitably smarter. And I still think it's going to be winner takes all from individual categories and segment stuff. And that winner will be able to pay more money, just like the winner of PPC or Google or Facebook ads or Insta ads is able to just pay more and more and more. And so I was trying to, I think Stephen Forth kind of forwarded it on to some people in his group. I was saying, well, maybe it is value based, but 2 or 3 derivations down the line, because that person that's left clearly is going to get value out of it. Just like lobbying for politicians, the person that's lobbying and keeps on lobbying and basically getting pretty good value out of it. Whereas most people who vote or lobby at a small amount with $5, there's no value in it. So it's a pretty random example, but anyway. So yes.
I think the problem right now is that perhaps we are going further away from the solution than closing up the gap. And I'll give you an example from something that you mentioned, but I think there is a useful example there. Google Ads, when it started before decades, and
Yeah.
I've seen it, you've seen it, how it evolved. In the beginning, it wasn't pay per click, it was pay per impression.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was the standard. That was the
Yeah.
standard. And I have done ads through Google like that, and paid for impressions and not for clicks. And the problem was that there was no clear path to conversion.
It's true.
It was
True.
their internal view. Obviously,
Yeah.
we have more bandwidth. We're showing your ad more times. You don't have any value, but we have cost, like compute time. Exactly that. And they tried to reflect that to their pricing. It failed miserably. And
Yeah.
eventually they thought that, okay, that's not a great way to do things because guys, they're not taking any value out of it. We're not just presenting their advertisement here and there with no clear path to success. But pay-per-click is something else because what they are promising is that we guarantee that this will land on your system, on your website, on your lead page. What you do afterwards, obviously, it's your thing. I can't control your sales mechanism, your marketing mechanism, everything within the company. But as far as I can control things, I guarantee and ensure that you will get the most out of your money. You will pay per click, obviously more than impressions. And now it's a lot more than it used to be before 2 decades or 15 years or whatever. But at least you are in control and you are getting actual value. The most value that you can get from a tool like that, then it's your thing. It's not their thing. I think this is, we see the opposite right now. Instead of getting towards actual value, we're getting not closer, but further away because we're overcomplicating things and reflecting, I'm talking about the vendor side, and reflecting our cost structure because everything is driven by compute time, nothing else. It's expensive for vendors. It's not like SaaS vendors where their gross profit was 80, 90% or something like that. It was outrageous. So practically there was no cost. It was just licensing and things like that, nothing else. Now it's not like that. They cannot afford to go extremely cheaper unless they have deep pockets because of funding and so on and so forth. Just some companies. That's the main issue right now. And that's the main problem and barrier for further adoption. And again, I'm not talking about the huge big companies or the mid-sized companies. I'm talking about the very small companies and individuals for paid accounts. The free accounts are free. So nothing to discuss there. I think that's the issue.
Yeah, no, I agree. They've definitely got problems to solve. But I think they need a middleman or middlewoman. I think for that same example of your per impression, per click, or the Facebook, that there were an intense number of people in a new industry that was profitable that would allow them to sit in between the huge complexity and the model switching in today's term, but in previous terms it would have been ad switching, context switching, that switching, and the person that says, well, I'm just going to put $100 on, here you go, please get me some value. And so I think, as I think about it more and more, there is a role for a very, 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 very specialized middle segment, not just consulting, not the big Accentures and stuff, no disrespect, but really intense knowledge base in between that says, George, I know the output you want or the outcome you want. I know the output of the machine, and I'm going to bridge that gap. And I'm going to take your money. I might charge you an extra 10%. So you want to put 100, it might cost you 110. and I'm going to basically deploy that money on various systems, open, close, whatever, and I'm going to get you as close to the outcome as I can possibly do. And if you don't like my service, you'll go to another, whatever they call, agency. So I think the complexity, as you pointed out, is so intense, from the input to the cost of the input to the cash in to the output to the re-questioning. It's actually so complex. It's kind of beyond the ordinary enterprise smart employee who doesn't have a lot of time on their hands, assuming they don't have like 8 hours to just drop their old job and let's just do this. They have an hour maybe. So I think it's moved beyond already the enterprise rollout of from an ordinary enthusiastic person who works at the enterprise.
I think the core of the problem is the cost structure of AI companies right now. The AI cost most likely is not the investment in creating the tool and so on and so forth, which is mostly one-off. There is continuous development, but it's mostly. The problem is consumption of compute time. And this is monopolized by a couple of big players. The energy part, obviously, because they are big consumers of energy, plus NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, I mean, the big guys that are developing the GPUs and all the infrastructure that all the compute time is generated from. As long as there are not a lot of players there to increase capacity for producing all this marvelous, great GPU infrastructure, I think there will always be a problem. The cost there will be big, and eventually this will all the AI companies will be tempted to transfer this cost on a cost plus basis practically to customers, which is exactly what Anthropic is doing. This is what I'm saying. It's not actually value-based pricing. It's mispositioned as value-based pricing, and everybody understands that it's cost plus pricing to a large extent. It's more this than value-based pricing. This great misperception and mispositioning will backfire in the market, and has already done this, I think. Unless we solve this problem, and I haven't seen any initiative yet. I have seen Sam Altman before 2 years saying that he will do a consortium with companies to develop GPUs and so on and so forth, but nothing happened. But if we see something more concrete and we see new companies or investments in existing ones, so the monopoly of NVIDIA and some others becomes not any monopoly, but we have more valid players in the market, I think this is where you will see a completely different pricing scheme for companies, and tokens will not die and not be fully replaced, but it won't be necessary for companies to follow this path as it is now in order to survive. Talking about vendors, it will be just another option among many other options for their pricing to maximize their profits with a sound and healthy cost base, which is not fully variable as it is right now. That's the main problem. The cost base is variable. The main problem is the variable cost, which is big, as opposed to standardized SaaS solutions with variable cost negligible. I mean, nobody cared about it. I think this is the...
I agree, mate. I think they definitely have a variable cost. But wouldn't they say your cost is also variable? So I think infrastructurally, they brought in a expandable variable employee, say, your intelligence, but without the kind of legal and mentality infrastructure of saying, well, of course, if George works here 8 hours more, we're going to pay him for 8 hours. And if I can just call him any time he's on a 0 hours contract, but I call him almost like an Uber, I call him, I pay him, I call him, I pay him, I call him, I pay him. Because we don't have that mechanism in our mind, we don't have that Uber mechanism in any enterprise firm. So therefore, we were not used to intermittent, basic cost-based movements. Whereas we kind of are for consultants, but even then it's a scheduled program. We need Deloitte for 3 months, or we need like BCG or whoever. And here's a budget for BCG. Go off and do your work, come back. And I think the tokens are definitely not working. But for them to work, it requires even more than just the pricing to work. it requires a complete mentality shift on some of the way things work in organizations. And I don't think they're ready to, one, do the work on that, or two, the organizations are ready to actually say, you know what, I'm going to completely change my HR, completely reconfigure my whole budgeting process around kind of almost intelligence per hour or compute per hour or something that denominates closer to AI. That's a radical shift, which even if AI got the pricing better, I still don't think it would be enough for it to really take hold unless they can convince the organizations to change.
What you said, we have, as a vendor, we have a variable cost, but also you have a variable. This, first of all, this has two readings. First reading, it's a cost plus in disguise. There is a variable cost for me and I transfer it to you, so it translates to a variable cost for you. It's fair,
Yeah.
but it's still cost plus. It's not related to actual value. That's the first reading. The second reading is that you do have an individualized added value per user, per token, per whatever, which may be true, but that doesn't mean that this translates automatically to value that the customer is willing to share.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen many cases, I've discussed with many customers and companies about outcome-based price. And sometimes vendors say that, okay, guys, we'll offer you this solution, and we promise you that cost will decrease by that, or revenue increase by that, or whatever. So the value is, let's say, 1 million.
Yeah.
And we take X%
Yeah.
out of it. That's generating this ROI, which looks great. And this is linear. So if you create more value, dear customer, then I will still get the same percentage.
Yeah.
This backfires. Customers don't want to do that. Up to a certain extent, it's okay. Once they have tested the whole thing
Yeah.
and it works, it's not okay anyway to share a percentage at a linear basis, a percentage of their profits or whatever, cost efficiency or whatever, cost cutting or
Yeah.
whatever, with the vendor. They don't like that
No.
at all. So there is a point after which variable and linear doesn't work anymore. So, but with tokens, this is the case because it's always linear. It's always linear. It doesn't end anywhere.
Yes.
That's a huge problem, and that's a misfit between what the customer considers value and what the vendor considers value, which is definitely not token. It's not entirely something entirely different, by the way, but it's definitely not the tokens as we know them today, which are, in my mind, it's still cost plus in disguise.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, to be honest, I don't know even if they're disguised as much anymore. I think pretty much they don't say a word. They just say this is a. And I've even heard that they needed them to be this price for the influence because essentially you kind of really need to release a model at least every 9 months, 6 months to 9 months, maybe 12 months. Say you have to be releasing a new model every 12 months. And so it's got to the kind of race to the bottom territory. So in that sense, but what would you think if tokens were scarce? So this is putting your economics hat on. So if tokens were scarce, because now everybody's got them and everybody's building data centers in, I don't know, in space and stuff. But what if tokens were scarce? What would you say then would happen?
But that will be artificial in our case. If that
Well,
was indeed the case, sorry?
yeah, maybe, but maybe if it wasn't artificial, assume it wasn't artificial, as in we're no more data centers because of politics and no more data centers in the space for a short time. So imagine there is a shortage.
It's supply versus demand. So if you decrease supply and something has some scarcity, it's limited and it's not offered to the amount that it was offered before, obviously prices will increase because of this scarcity, because the demand is more or less given. In this case, it will be unfortunate if this happens, obviously, because usually in emerging markets, you see supply increasing, not decreasing, unless it is decreased artificially for pricing and monetization purposes, which is not a great thing. It hurts trust in the market. But if something really happens and for some reason supply decreases, yes, obviously prices will increase. It will be healthy. It will be reflected in the market, and everybody will have other option. We see that with semiconductor companies. If there is a fire in a factory, for instance, or with the war, for instance, something is bombarded and have an energy factory that is blown up or whatever. In this case, indeed, supply is contained and decreased, and indeed, prices go up. Nobody's happy with that, but they do understand why this is happening. It's healthy. So I think that's the main issue. In our case, I don't think there is a supply problem. We need more and definitely not cut the existing capacity. So if we have an artificial supply containment and decrease, in this case, I think that this will backfire big time. All suppliers, all them.
Yes, I'd agree, but maybe I kind of posited that to finish to say that if there was a reduction in supply, in the sense that if they're all losing money and they're not completely rubbish in terms of finance, they're all losing money on not just on the kind of new models, but also the whole infrastructure and the cost base and stuff, go to market. Either they're very, very bad companies, really badly run, which they may be, don't get me wrong, or their prices are too low, basically. So either the cost base is too high because they're just rubbish at management, or they're very, very young or very early, or trying to become a monopoly, which is also a terrible state. But if they're in a competitive state and they're losing money, then and they're kind of in control of their cost base, they're doing what they need to do to attract people, etc., then you could argue that their prices are just too low. If the prices are too low and they were to increase, that already reduces demand because people are starting to recoil already. And that then goes back to the same thesis of, well, if the prices are really high, the only sponsor internally is someone who is so focused on his or her return that they're going to get out of it, that they're willing to bid more. And I think that none of that has been. Yeah.
This may be the case. If you think of short-term finances and mid-term possibly for the next months, couple of years and so on and so forth, yes, it makes sense to increase prices. They should do some elasticity measures and analysis and research and all these things, and they could find out that perhaps their pricing is suboptimal. Most likely it is. And they could increase prices and they could increase their profitability, revenues, blah, 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 blah. But there is a big but and big if. This is an emerging market. It started before 3 years. The investment started before, but actually it went mainstream before 2-3 years with ChatGPT and all the other. So it's definitely a completely new, nothing that we've seen before. It's not just another new product or new product category within the existing market. It's a completely new market. Most people think that AI was born before 3 years. As opposed to the reality, it was born before almost a century. But people believe that because that was the time when it went mainstream. So you have a completely new market that it's definitely still emerging. It creates a huge ecosystem that continuously expands, started from almost nothing. Not nothing, but almost nothing. This is supposed to be unprofitable for many years, sometimes even for 10 years, before it gets into something that smells like profitability. So you are building and you are fighting for the ecosystem. You have people on board your platforms using you and so on and so forth. And then you have the luxury of changing pricing schemes and so on and so forth, because you capitalize on the relationship that you have built, or the relevance that you have built with customer audiences, and the changes in pricing, then they are targeted. You won't change the price enormously to someone who is just using casually ChatGPT for leisure or for individual purposes, but you would definitely do that for an enterprise that have been using your system for many, many years. And
Yeah.
they have proved, first of all, to themselves that the value they get is 1 million, they just pay 1,000. In this case, obviously, there is room for improvement, and the companies will be more than happy to pay the additional money because right now they have a 1 to 1,000 ROI. They will have been okay to have 1 to 20 or 1 to 10. So definitely you can do that. Right now, you can perhaps do that with a small elite of very, very big companies, but for most customers, I think you are still penetrating the market to expand the ecosystem and make them attached to your platform instead to your competitor. So I don't think they can afford to increase prices or fix prices a lot, at least not.
Cool. Okay, we'll end on that, and that'll be the clip note, which is you can't increase your prices. They are companies. I'll send that around to them. Good. That was a good discussion, mate. Good chat.
Great.
Definitely not solved problem, but no, it's yeah.
We can solve it. It's their problem to solve. We are witnesses of what's happening in the market.
Well, yeah.
To offer an opinion, nothing else.
Well, I thought, we normally are, George, but you're right. I think your point about no one came to you with Salesforce saying, you know what, I might do a CRM, but I'm just going to give you a skeleton and you go for it. So you're right. No one came to you with an unfinished product. It might have been early finished, but it wasn't unfinished, whether it be Notion or Microsoft Excel or Lotus 123. This is the first time that I've ever actually had my hands on an unfinished product and been paying for it. But that's just life. Same, and you're the same. Yeah, it's an unfinished product.
Exactly.
You're right. Yeah. But we seem to like paying for it. So, okay, my man. We'll end on that note.
The pricing committee, velvet rope cartel, turning every checkout into Dante's seventh hell. Can we simplify? Gets treated like a crime, cause complexity looks smart when you present it in a slide. Every metric looking healthy till the profit disappear, like magic trick performed by venture capitalists of the year. Net retention floating high like a helium parade till the AWS invoice enters with a switchblade.